Our view of the toughest ride in the rough and tumble world of motocross racing. Once a year, the most celebrated riders in the sport migrate to the Southern California town of Carlsbad to test their skills and stamina on an unforgiving patch of rock, mud, and slippery sand. The Carlsbad Raceway, for 13 years the home of the most significant motocross competition in this country. An annual favorite on ABC's Wide World of Sports, the United States Grand Prix Motocross Motorcycle Championship. These are the moments just preceding the start of the most significant dirt bike motorcycle race in the United States. The fastest motocross racers in the world leaving this small chute one by one in qualifying order to seek their places along the starting grid. Each of them looking for the first in the series of tiny competitive edges which can lead to victory in the United States Grand Prix Motocross Motorcycle Championship. Hello, I'm Jim Lampley. If you've been with us for any of the 12 preceding annual appearances of this event on ABC's Wide World of Sports, then you may already know that it is the only event of its kind in the United States, the only American stop on a 12-nation circuit which leads to the World Championship in Grand Prix motocross racing.
A change in the track this year, Jim, is that the starting gate, which you see there at the top of the screen, has been moved back away from the first turn by roughly 60 feet. The intent was to let the pack string out a little bit more before they bunch up for the first turn. It should make for a safer start, but of course there's no way to be sure.
And now as you see the riders lined up along that grid, they will burst from there through the starting chute, make a left-hand hairpin turn onto the course, and begin the series of circuits around this course, which comprise the first of the two motos in this Grand Prix. Now the gate goes down, and there they go. And already you can see how dry the course is as widening plumes of dust billow into the air behind each bike. Now around this hairpin and out onto the course. One bike down, two bikes down, 3, 4, 5 bikes down, and one of them, Sam Posey, was that belonging to the defending champion, American Brock Glover. His was the first bike to go down, but now there's a leader out there.
And Jim, surprisingly, it's a European, it's Eric Gabors, and even more surprising, you realize he broke his leg only 17 days ago. He's riding, not yet fully recovered.
It is indeed Gabors, number 5 of Holland, who has taken the lead. Behind him, number 3 is David Thorpe of Great Britain, who is one of the strong contenders to win this year's World Championship. Number 16, Ron Lachine, has now moved into 3rd place, and he is right up toward the front. As they make the circuit the first time, Lachine now 2nd place behind Gabors. Thorpe is in 3rd place. The number 2 rider in 4th place, George Jobay.
29 turns, Jim, on this track. It's roughly a mile long. They don't average more than about 30 miles an hour, but they do hit 60 in the fastest parts of the track. Well, Gabors just managing to hold off Lachine. Lachine only 18 years old. Jim, very inexperienced. Right there, Lachine, who is from nearby El Cajon, has just surged into the lead. Ronnie Lachine.
Wasting no time, but you wonder how much of a price a rider is going to pay to go very hard in these early laps. The moto lasts more than 40 minutes. The temperature is over 100 degrees, and Ronnie Lachine is flying already. You see him up off the seat as he moves it up the Carlsbad Freeway and now down the long downhill.
Yeah, it drops 30 stories, Jim, in just over 300 yards. I should have said 10 stories of depth and 300 yards of track distance, so it's extremely steep. Lachine, interestingly, is having only his 2nd ride ever in one of these big 500cc bikes. And the thought is that even though he may be able to lead and display this kind of flashy speed, when we get to the last 10 minutes or so of the moto, this man may be exhausted. We'll have to see.
You look at Lachine now as he dominates this first lap around the Carlsbad Raceway. Each lap a little more than a mile long. It takes them just under 2 minutes to complete one lap, and now Lachine goes down Devil's Drop near the start-finish line underneath the overpass and has completed one lap with already a healthy lead over the rest of the field.
The track, as you can see, is dry, a kind of adobe dryness. You not only does the bike slide a lot, as you see Lachine fight that slide there, but also, of course, the heat reflects back off the surface of the track into the face of the rider. It's hot out there.
Behind Lachine now, 2nd place belongs to Thorpe of Great Britain. 3rd place belongs to Eric Gabors of Holland, as the European riders have moved up to assert themselves early, though Ronnie Lachine is currently running away with the lead. Thorpe of Great Britain in 2nd place. George Jobay is now moved into 3rd place. Gabors is in 4th place.
you see Thorpe there in second place on the bike number 3, Honda number 3. He is the leader right now in the World Championship, and this race is all important to him. Oh, there's a spill. Jim, someone is down. It's a Lachine.
That is Lachine who has gone down.
Now Thorpe has taken the lead. Jobé right behind him. Lachine struggling to get that bike. He's called Lachine the Machine back into action. There was that kind of mistake that you might expect from a rookie.
And as you watch the new leader, David Thorpe, disappearing over a hill, a look back at the fall, Sam.
Well, of course, Jim, it does illustrate how dry the track is and very slippery, but Lachine has been having trouble since the moto began. He's made several minor mistakes. His feet have come off the foot pegs on a couple occasions, and he completely took a wrong line in one of the turns, so this is not too surprising.
And there you saw number 3, David Thorpe, going by into the lead, which he holds right now. The now retired bike of 18-year-old Ronnie Lachine. Lachine, who had been leading the first of the 2 motos which make up the United States Grand Prix Motocross, now nurses elbow and shoulder injuries after the sudden fall, which has left the race in a 2-man battle between England's David Thorpe and George Jobé of Belgium. Meanwhile, a look at the course on which this race takes place. You already saw the 100-meter burst from the starting line, then to the 180-degree turn, followed by 2 hairpins that get the riders onto the course. 3 more turns before a dip called Rattlesnake Gulch, where spectators line up on a footbridge to watch from overhead. And then the most critical section of the course, Sam Posey.
Well, it's called the downhill, Jim, and it is exceedingly steep. A 10-story descent in less than 300 yards of travel. It's a place where the top riders can show their nerve and quite often make passes right at the bottom.
And from the downhill, a series of gentle turns take the rider back to what amounts to the front straight, over the Devil's Drop, under the main footbridge, and we return to the action, where once again the leader is David Thorpe of Great Britain, behind him George Jobé of Belgium. We're accustomed to asking in a motorsport, Sam, what is top speed? I would assume it's fair to say that top speed is really of very little relevance here, that acceleration is what matters.
You're absolutely right. Acceleration, and look at that!
There goes George Jobé, and Thorpe wouldn't let him by. Just for a moment, Jobé appeared to have pulled the front wheel past Thorpe into first place. Thorpe would not quite let him get by.
This illustrates an interesting thing about the technique of these 2 riders, Jim. Thorpe comes into the turn slowly and comes off like a rocket ship. Jobé is coming in very hard, braking very, very late, and then he's slow off the turn. He was able to take the lead simply because he came in fast, but meantime, Thorpe was already positioned to give it throttle. He took the lead right back again.
You've already seen how omnipresent the experience of injury can be in this sport. David Thorpe, no exception. He broke his leg in 3 separate places 5 years ago. Well, we're about midway through, or just a little past midway through, the first moto. And for the last 9 laps, this has been a pitched battle at the front between David Thorpe of Great Britain and George Jobé, who may finally have gone by him now. Thorpe goes back to the inside, and Jobé shades him with the rear wheel and has taken the lead. Marvelous piece of riding there by George Jobé, who went outside to get by him and then came back inside to hold him off. And so now it is Jobé who has taken over the lead. Jobé, one of the handful of great riders from the nation of Belgium, and Thorpe, who moves into second place. And still behind them, the 2 Americans, David Bailey and Brock Glover, are, if not biding their time, certainly riding well enough to stay close to the front. Bailey there is a very strong 3rd place at this moment. Carlsbad Raceway now beyond the midway point of the first moto in the United States Grand Prix Motocross, and suddenly the story here is no longer David Thorpe of England, who's begun to drop back, nor at this moment is the primary focus on the leader, George Jobé of Belgium, because the man in second place in the middle of your screen, number 11, is American rider David Bailey, who flirted with success here a year ago and is taking the lead.
Bailey's ride is magnificent at this point, and I've got to believe, Jim, that his fitness is starting to be a factor. The Europeans have come over this year with a little more time to prepare for this event than they've had in the past, but still the heat of the day is starting to take its toll.
This event approaches the level of a holy grail for David Bailey, who led in both motos a year ago, but suffered mishaps in both motos, which kept him from having a chance to win this championship. Now he's back in front with the crowd behind him.
You know, Jim, to be an American in the lead the U.S. Grand Prix is quite something, and you really feel that crowd urging you on. We are seeing the crowd now come alive in a way that they were not when David Thorpe was leading the race and battling with Jobet.
We remind you, this is the second year in a row in which Bailey has led in the first moto. A year ago, he was in this position with the crowd similarly urging him on, hit a bump on the backside of the course, and broke a spoke on his rear wheel. He later said that that was as much his mistake as a mechanical error because he had lost concentration, gotten into a point on the course where he hadn't intended to be. Then later he led the second moto a year ago, and on a similar loss of concentration, spilled from atop his bike. So this is a time for some soul searching for David Bailey. He knows that he has been able to get into this position before. What he hasn't been able to do before is to capitalize on it in the way that he hopes to do right now.
Jim, watch Bailey's technique. He shifts his weight forward for steering control, backward for traction, and he controls the throttle so as to fly the bike, literally, across the worst terrain.
Right now, the crowd is whooping it up because of the man in the red and white leathers right there, number 14, Brock Glover. Last year's champion who fell on the first lap of this moto has gotten back into contention, and right there has moved past Jobet into second place. We'll be back. Lap now of moto number 1, and David Bailey appears destined to begin making up for the mistakes of a year ago.
Well, you know, thanks to his father, Gary, David is probably one of the best taught riders in history. And it makes you wonder, Jim, how much of racing really can be taught and how much is instinctive. And I asked Mario Andretti about that because of his son, and he said, you know, the one thing I can't teach is psychological control.
You see there how far it is from David Bailey back to Brock Glover right there on the right-hand side of those two bikes. The man going by now out of the left side of your screen. He is a good 12 or 13 seconds behind Bailey. So Bailey has no problem winning the moto if he can simply stay upright.
As we see these men riding at the end of these long, demanding motos, it makes me realize, of course, once again, the emphasis in this sport is on endurance, and it's surprising how little body fat these top motocrossers have. On the average, 10% body fat or less.
Certainly less than 10%, Sam, on David Bailey, who is in superb condition and has focused most of his year on this particular race. You see him coming over Devil's Drop now, under the footbridge, past the checkered flag, and Bailey has won moto number 1. Just to recap, a year ago, he led in the first moto and broke a spoke on his rear wheel. He led in the second moto and spilled over the front of the handlebars, effectively giving up his chance at victory. That event was won by the man who's now finishing second in this moto, number 14, Brock Glover from El Cajon, California. Third place in this moto has just gone to George Jobet of Belgium. And now, as we look back at the moment earlier in the moto, when Bailey effectively decided matters by going by Jobet and into first place. Remember, the overall championship is decided by a combination of finishes in both of the two motos. David Bailey's in the driver's seat. We'll be back for the second moto later in ABC's Wide World of Sports. The brief rest period between the two separate races which make up the United States Grand Prix Motocross is never quite long enough for riders who have already spent more than 40 minutes wrestling dirt bikes around treacherous terrain. Today, as the Carlsbad, California temperature lingered beyond 100 degrees Fahrenheit, the world's best in this sport banked their fires and did what they could to refuel their bodies' engines for what they knew would be the hardest part of the day. I can feel the heat. It should be pointed out that in preceding years, when two riders have had the same aggregate finish, as would be the case if Glover went 1 and Bailey 2 in this moto, then aggregate time has been the deciding factor, the tiebreaker in effect. That's no longer the case. Under a new rule this year, the winner of the second moto has the advantage in that instance. So it's worth noting that Glover seemed to settle for second in the first moto, maybe with an eye toward taking the upper hand in this second one.
Well, Jim, I think Brock had backed off a little bit at the end of that moto because he was tired. Remember, he had fallen at the first turn in that moto and was right at the back of the pack, had to come all the way through. I think he was trying to save his energy. The battle, too, between Honda with Bailey aboard and Yamaha with Glover.
Now, there they are, lined up along the grid. Those who will start the second moto. There has been some attrition. Ronnie Lachine, who led early in the first moto, has not started. The two key men to watch for as they come out of the chute, number 11, David Bailey, number 14, Brock Glover, and there they go out onto the race course. And There at the front of the pack, number 3, who you see with the lead right there, is David Thorpe of England. 11, Bailey is at the front as well, and the crowd roars as Bailey goes into the lead. And also right up there at the front with David Bailey, you can see him right behind him is Brock Glover. So already the battle is set as Glover and Bailey have gone to the front early in the second moto, and no script could have been written better for the beginning of the second moto. Bailey in the lead, Glover on his rear wheel. Number 3, Thorpe is in third place. Behind them, the rest of the riders stringing out, and the drama is right at the front of the pack.
And I think, Jim, that both the Americans in the lead feel that, of course, they must win this moto. Glover knows that he has to. Bailey desperately, of course, trying to hang on and win the second one and thereby win overall. There's no question of holding back. There's really not a big factor of strategy. This is going to be an all-out race, and I think it's only in the last 10 minutes of the moto, when physical fitness begins to tell its story, that we're going to really see who's going to win this thing.
Right now, they are relatively fresh. They have had a brief period to rest between motos. Both men finished the first moto riding in relaxed fashion. Neither of them pressed to the limit because they were totally satisfied with their first and second place positions during the final laps of that moto. They trained together here on this course a week ago. They know each other's moves very intimately from years of racing against each other in the Supercross Series and the National Motocross Series here in the USA. And so they have all of the equipment they need to deal with this situation. It's just a matter of who is going to ride better in this second moto.
It's hard to think of two competitors who have more respect for each other. You know, I've been talking, Jim, to both these men in the last few minutes, and I have a hunch, it's just a hunch, that Brock Glover thinks he is faster than David Bailey, basically faster. And you know what? I think David may think so too. So if that's true, then Bailey obviously feels he has got to stay with Brock Glover, that he can't let him get away or he'll be beaten.
They have completed one lap, and those two have already put a few seconds between themselves and the third place bike. So at the moment, it is precisely the 1-2 battle which we highlighted for you at the beginning of this moto. David Bailey, number 11, 23 years old, from Axton, Virginia. Brock Glover, number 14, also in his early 20s. Glover from El Cajon, California, here in San Diego County. Bailey led in both motos here a year ago. Glover wound up winning the overall championship here.
Look at Glover fight to keep control of that. Glover has changed his leathers and his helmet between the two motos. You see him now in this bright pink. I don't recall his having worn that before in this event. Whether that was a psychological ploy, conceivably to work on the mind of David Bailey, a very conservative man, I don't know. It certainly surprised me to see Brock Glover turn up in pink. Nonetheless, it certainly isn't affecting his riding style at all.
I am told that Glover has worn the pink leathers in one previous race, that an all-star Race of Champions appearance, and that he regards them as a lucky outfit for him. They are, and not to just use the pun, but a shocking sight on a motocross course.
However, he is a man who physically could be described as in the pink.
And now I think we've taken that about as far as it will go. So we're on lap 2 of what for the moment is a two-man showcase. There goes Glover on the inside. Brock Glover going by David Bailey. So now Glover holds the lead for the very first time early in the second moto. Glover, perhaps attempting to establish psychological dominance right away, has taken the lead away from David Bailey. Never ridden the second moto of a motocross can attest. This ranks among motorsports as the ultimate young man's pursuit. So dominated by teenagers and riders in their early 20s that the leader here, 25-year-old Brock Glover, is already being retired from motocross by some racing journalists.
I just turned 25, and I don't really think that's that old. And if everyone talks about it, and I tell myself I'm getting old, and that maybe, you know, that could happen. But I don't feel I'm really that old, and I think I'm at the prime of my career. I'm doing better this year than I've ever done, and I'm leading the outdoor championship, and I'm also leading the indoor Supercross championship, which is the first time I've ever done that. So I'm pretty happy with what's going on this year, and I don't really feel like retiring as of yet.
And certainly, Sam, if he can hold on to the lead he presently enjoys and become the first American ever to win the United States Grand Prix Motocross 2 years in a row, retirement will be farther than ever from his mind.
Well, look at this. It's a beautiful ride, and Brock is pulling substantially ahead of Bailey right now. I think it's exactly this kind of speed, Jim, that David Bailey feared Brock Glover had. Glover and the Yamaha, an excellent combination. He's lost it. Unbelievable. He'd been pressing so hard, he lost it. Now he's trying to restart it.
David Bailey goes riding by Brock Glover into first place. Glover is able to get the bike going again, and there's such a large margin between those two riders and third place David Thorpe that Thorpe, by the time he reaches that point on the course, won't even be aware that Glover suffered a mishap. But Brock Glover has just put some suspense back into Moto 2 as he has ceded the lead to David Bailey.
If his confidence has not been shaken by that fall, then he should be able to catch Bailey again. Now, of course, we'll be further into the moto. This is a look at what happened. It looks as if on that extremely dry, almost adobe-like surface, he just got on the throttle a little too soon coming off of that turn. Partly, that's why he was so fast. He was getting the throttle on very quickly in the turn. What I was going to say is, it'll be deeper in the moto, of course, if he's able to catch Bailey again, and Bailey will defend his position more rigorously, I think. Very exciting stuff.
Well, this is precisely the opportunity that David Bailey has almost certainly been daydreaming about since his two mishaps here 1 year ago. He believes he should have won this event last year. He wants very badly to win it this year. For this particular racer, every moto begins at home in the tiny South Virginia community of Axton, where one of the world's most elaborate backyard dirt bike courses gives David Bailey a constant opportunity to rehearse his chops. The sons of football players play football, and lifelong gym rats beget toddling gym rats. Bailey's father lived for motocross, and for a long time, young David knew that he would too. Bailey's success has given him the luxury of dictating the terms of his existence. For most motocross racers, that would mean the opulence of Southern California. For David, it means the quiet solitude of Virginia.
I don't really enjoy being in the heart of the city. When I go to eat at a restaurant, I don't have to wait 45 minutes. When I want to go riding, I want to be able to put on my gear and go riding, not have to load up, go get gas, drive in traffic. And I think the riding areas are becoming less and less in California, where here I have a couple hundred acres. I can ride anytime I want, any time of the day. I have a little lake that I can go jet skiing on. I don't have to go anywhere, and it just makes everything a lot easier for me to do. I enjoy the country. I lived in the city until I was about 10 years old, and I didn't enjoy it all that much. I like it much better here.
It is a part of David Bailey's fulfillment that he is making his father's dreams come true. And for any American motocross racer, one of the biggest dreams is to win this event, the United States Grand Prix. So there is much at stake now for David and for his mother and father as he circles the course with the lead in the second moto.
Sometimes it's very hard when you've been pressing hard to suddenly change your rhythm and have a big lead. A commanding lead. Brock is down again. Brock Glover down once more, and he looks, frankly, he looks a little groggy to me.
A second mishap for Glover in this moto, a moto that began so brilliantly for him as he came out and seized the lead from David Bailey. But now, as Glover unhurriedly begins to get back on his bike, Bailey's lead is getting larger and larger.
He's going the wrong way on the course. Now, that's something that is against the rule. You see, he rode slightly downhill. He's going uphill now, and that helped him restart the bike. It's a nitpick, I realize, but that is against the rule.
He gained an advantage from it?
Well, arguably, you see, it might have been harder to start his bike on the uphill. I mean, I think he's a little groggy right now.
But apparently not a bit groggy, and now riding with a commanding lead is number 11, David Bailey, trying to secure victory in the second moto to go with the one he has already put away in moto number 1.
He looks pretty fit still, Jim, but you know, he's probably feeling more tired than if Brock Glover was actually pushing him, because he has time to think about it a little.
We're talking now with Gary Bailey, the father of David Bailey. Even as we watch David dominating Moto 2, Gary, it appeared early in this moto that Brock was faster, was able to put a margin between himself and David. Do you think he was going too hard at that point?
Well, I think he might have been, and that's just one thing that David was counting on. He was hoping that Brock was going to push himself a little bit and possibly make a mistake. The other thing was we kind of felt like looking at Brock after the first moto, he was a little more tired than David was. So what David's strategy was to stay within striking distance of at least 4 or 5 seconds, and then hopefully on the last 15 minutes of the race to put on a charge.
Would you like to see him him quit soon?
I'd like to see him quit while he's strong, and number one, I hope he doesn't drag it out and wait till he starts falling back to get out of it. I think he gets another 3 years in and performs really well as he has, and I expect that he will. I think that will be sufficient.
All right, thanks very much, Gary Bailey, for joining us and giving us your impressions on what is a thrilling day for the whole Bailey family. And now, a last chance to appreciate the efficiency and indeed the artistry of David Bailey as he proceeds through his last lap over this course. He hangs on to win, as he apparently will. He will be the first man to win both motos in this event since the first American to win it, Marty Moats, back in 1980. And he seems to be accelerating just a little bit as he tries to juice up the crowd a little bit on this last lap, going by some of the slower bikes. Bailey is enjoying this overwhelming victory, not only over the entire field, but most specifically over the man who is his primary competition among top young American motocross racers. Brock Glover chased him in the early part of this photo. This will be, incidentally, only the third victory in the United States Grand Prix for the Honda factory, and that's a little bit surprising because they are preeminent among all of the factory teams in this sport for the past few years. Now Bailey, number 11, waving to the crowd, comes under the footbridge and makes one of the last turns onto what amounts to the front straight as he heads toward the checkered flag. California crowd in Carlsbad watches now as David Bailey, a Virginian, takes off his goggles, throws them to the crowd over the Devil's Drop, and with an easy victory, David Bailey has made up for a full year of disappointment. Last year he led both motos and didn't win. This year he won them both. And we've just learned that for riding his bike against the grain of the course, Glover was disqualified from the second moto. That dropped him to 7th overall. Second place overall went to Thorpe of England, improving his chances to win the World Grand Prix Championship. Third place to George Jobet of Belgium. Now, for Sam Posey, this is Jim Lampley saying so long from Carlsbad, California.